Her digital poems have been shown at the Library of Congress and also at the Bibliothèque Nationale de France. Strickland is the director of the Electronic Literature Organization and co-editor of the first electronic literature collection. Her own work across both multimedia and print is being collected by the David M. Rubenstein Rare Book and Manuscript Library at Duke University. The recipient of fellowships from the National Endowment for the Arts, the National Endowment for the Humanities, and the New York Foundation for the Arts, Strickland's work has been praised as innovative, lyrically intense, and wonderfully illuminating. It is our great pleasure to present to you this evening, Stephanie Strickland. I think she's here.
You were unmuted.
Okay, let's start again. Hello to you all. And thank you, Leah. I'm going to read, well, I wanted to remember that all of the people who are on the West Coast now, and hope that we can devote some thought to their great difficulty and hope that they will be able to breathe better soon. I'm going to read 10 poems, most of them from one of my new books, How the Universe is Made. This poem is from decades ago when I was in New Hampshire, what the world used to feel like. It's called Visiting the Woods. I hate the tall pines down, their dark green arms curved over the snow. They look like mothers in a storm, bodies thrown completely on the young. Broken limbs, stumps, strips of bark. This withered, jagged wood is beautiful. Trees rubbed gray or silver if thin. Leaves that curl like parchment on a dry stem. Beds of rusted needle. The pond frozen hard. At the edge of a large field, where at night the stars stand in rivers of smaller stars, filling the low sky, coming down closer to the boulders. A small fire smokes in a grove. The air today not nearly so freezing. The man who built the fire leans unmoving on his shovel. We watch the red, transparent movements filling with air, smell the pine burning. Is it all right? I asked. Yes, he said. Then, very unlike him, he smiled and said it again. Yes. This is a poem about a jewel of a bird found only in the Western Hemisphere. I used to watch them at my grandmother's house. A morpho is a butterfly. The name of the poem is From the New World. More vivid even than the morpho, more still than the sphinx moth, oar-winged, warlike, you attack and drive off hawks. No pigment, only light split through rigid structures in your barbules into ribbons, crimson, ruby, fire green. Grackles, gouramis, peacocks, scarabs, your foils. None so radiant, so swift. Your colors never strut, never shift in display. They are there, are not. And again, not. We are huge. We hang back. We can feel your hum on our horizon, see a furious blur out there in the garden this morning near the vine. Torpid by night, flushed with blue skylight, your heart, the discs of your wings spin, scatter, cinders of quickness, burning their fuel, not to soar, to stand still over the flower, shaking so little, the needle bill and tubular tongue that touch the dark throat of the blossom. The New World was, of course, new, only for colonial invaders. This next poem pays better attention to history. It's called Constant Quiet. Constant quiet, intercoastal green and silver, muscled gill flesh slipping into, opens out of constant quiet. Constant quiet, Mississippi overflowing, built a levee longer, higher than the Great Wall of China. Constant quiet. Constant quiet, building, horse, paunch, pistol, man, long, back, cropper, convict, steel muscled, constant quiet. Constant quiet, longer, higher than the Great Wall of China, Egypt, Mississippi, hunger, flogged. Constant quiet. Constant quiet, storm of air, ocean storms, river rising, field gone, train gone, man gone, constant quiet. Constant quiet, who can open, who can hold it? Constant quiet. So as Faulkner said, the past isn't dead, it isn't even past. Nothing to fence or to bank, nothing to unveil or reveal or to save, even while feeling the violence pile up inside, petty or other. Nothing to read, petty or bloody. No well, no womb, no replenishing silo left unbroken, none unpoisoned, even as violence re-arrives. Even now, moist, iris, ayahuasca, Arabians racing, ethical resistance to enlisting brine shrimp, koto duet with bee, heirloom seed, a television tuned to snow. So 2020 imposes the present as no other year I can remember. I'm sure many of you share that sensation. Varieties of ecocide, does it matter? Text 30001. Viral versus nuclear warheads. Answers at 10. We hear from gamers, math professor simulators, those in actual rehearsal. Involuntary immersion in the real. A pharmal target, each blockbuster drug to reach each until it goes off patent. Factoid, leeches make shocking comeback. So the public voice. But for more than 190,000 people in this country, private grief. This poem is called Keeping Company with You, comma, for my father. The gills still swimming with you, breathing for you, tumbling backward towards some future. Shallow breath, a passing shiver. Your dream of light, knowing no other time, moves inside, rocking shadow of water, as if someone still stood on the broken patio, haggling for hours, the price of a pool lamp, its broken cord. So this is a longer poem. It's a deeper history of Earth's oil, the solar system, and ancient beliefs. It's called Hag of Bear, or the Calendar Girl. As ancient forests turned to black blood by the weight of the earth are put alight, by the rocket's glare, by the brilliant bombs bursting red in the bitter air, a cockpit womb exploding there, the Challenger in fiery flight, the Hag of Bear burning in air, the sea itself set afire by night, will turn on the earth, will hold its waves coherent, drone one wailing dirge, one gathering might will surge away from the vortices, the hissing cry of little wheels, and one wall rise, one shrug, one massing watery wall. No breaking fall, no broken power, no canceling phase, but racing its way and gaining speed in straits at the Drake for towering miles. Implacable tons of frozen, hollow, watery boom erase green earth, dislodge the moon from fragile orbit. Flame and slag, the meteoric womb of moon come hurtling down. The flying broom a woman rode, a woman alone at her sweeping work, saving leavings, accounted prayer, reckoning remnant patch and scrap, leastings, faintly floating webs of star drift. Woman aligned with a goose, astride the mother who navigates, who flies in formation though skies are falling, who flies though the poles themselves aren't fixed. What cup, what broom, what web, what term, over the rainbow, open sky, a movable home to none denied, with you, by and by. This is a poem in 6 tiny numbered parts, and I'll read the numbers. It's called Evil is External. 1. Evil is external to itself. Where it is not felt. It is felt where it is not. The feeling of evil is not too evil. Where it is, the God-blaming criminal. Where it is not. 3. A woman. Feeling in her body what the rapist denies hoarding, denies passing on, because 4, he does not feel it. She feels it, the whole weight of his force and his forgetfulness. 5, it stops with her. It stops her. No one wants to see it. To see it is against the soul's 6th aspiration. Ergo, she is beaten or killed or stoned or shunned. So I read 2 more poems. In the spirit of crushing change, this poem is called Burning Briar Scanning Tunnel. There is a zombie at the wheel who finds acceptable all risk. His flesh looks like mine. A crinkle monkey in the swamp, mind tricky and brisk. His moves feel like mine. Headless mannequin draped, white print snakeskin dress. Pale fakery filling me with dread. A boneless man used up by apparatchik juggernaut. A scrivener like me. The one who hoped to poach cockroach strategy adrift. Like me, time amnesic, overreaching. Cord cut all, beyond the call to heal or heal. Fold, molt, wormhole, crush, crash, course. And I'll end with this poem, Solstice. Reef snow feathers the asphalt, girders, violent rock. Slate blue humpbacks cross the sky. Now and then a leafless stand of trees flares up inside a wind. Long slide into long dark stops and pause. There is a pause. Turns to climb. Thank you very much.
Good evening. Thank you, Stephanie, for that lovely reading. And thank you, too, for reminding us to not forget about the destruction of human life and animals and forests and homes in California. Let me also add to that all the suffering of those from COVID-19 and all of its fallout. Thank you very much. Excuse me. My name is Renee Garrity, and I am here to introduce Camille Yvette Welsch tonight. And my paper just went off the screen, so I'll be right with you. Fortunately, I printed out just in case this happened. Okay. Camille Yvette has her MFA from the University or State College, Pennsylvania, and she is now a teaching professor of English there with the Mount Nittany Lions. And anyway, she is the author of a chapbook full, and her current work is called the Four, let me read this, the Four Unbearable Children in the Christendom. This is published by WordWorks in 2019. Camille Yvette is part of a very special program, and that is she and a group of poets interact with members of senior citizens, and they work with the citizens and write a special poem for them and put that poem out into the world and tell the world about poetry, as well as these people that are now older. I'm sorry, I've just been muted here. Anyway, she has the nomination for the Pushcart Prize, and she is the editor of Literary Mama, and her work is very intriguing. It is a book that discusses 4 children who are in our culture today not considered attractive by our norms. And it follows their lives as they grow into adulthood. And it deals with, as one reviewer stated, excuse me, I can't read my own writing here. Let's see. That deals with raising adopted children and ethics of anthropological studies of these children. She is a remarkable poet, and it's a wonderful theme throughout this book that gives you just a lot to think about in terms of our society and how we value things. Please let me invite you to listen to Camille Yvette Welsch, and by her own description is a poet, teacher, reviewer, and badass mama. Welcome, Camille Yvette. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Renee. And thank you to all the folks at Cafe Muse who've made this possible. I really appreciate it. And thank you to Stephanie Strickland, who I didn't know that I wanted to be when I grew up. That was a wonderful reading. I really enjoyed it. So a little bit about my book. I'll even show you, The 4 Ugliest Children in Christendom. As Renee said, it is kind of a novel in verse. It tells the story of these 2 anthropologists who adopt children from around the world, 4 of them, and they take them into their home to do a longitudinal study on their ugliness. And in the book, there are subject reports done by the anthropologists. There's a 3rd-person narrator who tells you something about the children, and then the children themselves speak. And so I'll give you some poems from some of those perspectives to kind of give you an idea of those primary speakers. The anthropologists collect subjects. It began in pity, weathered white hands plucking the lumpen flesh bag from a basket on a hill in the Hebrides, tucking the baby boy in a backpack and heading for home. A year later, they found the girl in a ruined church in Guatemala, her hair and skin white as frost, her body a pile of brittle clacking sticks, vibrant pink eyes, and a wailing pink mouth. 10 years later, the twins removed from an abbey and a reluctant nun. The 2 babies linked like squiggled lines, each sucking the other's thumb, faces somewhere between old age and moldering skull. The anthropologists brought them home as well, to a colonial house with an extensive library covering bats, insects, bones, fossils, philosophy, and cultural relativism. No babies' blankets, no brightly colored rooms, instead charts. Subject A, at 3 years old, 75 pounds. Subject B, albino. Subjects C and D, at 3, both children 35 pounds, arms broken during separation. The 4 ugliest children in Christendom go to the mall. The 4 ugliest children in Christendom do not date, eat in public, gossip, talk on the phone, hang out. They breathe with their mouths open, wheezing the soundtrack of their colossal lack. When the girl, a ghost of laddered bones, goes to the makeup counter, the stylist clutches a compact and wonders, what am I to emphasize? She brushes layers of foundation trying to rebuild, but Rome wasn't built in a day. And the ugliest girl walks away looking a little beige, a little cracked. Her face a caked pumpkin on the white twig of her neck. The twins terrorize the toy store, gleeful in their ability to repulse. They lurk around corners, then leap out, startling children once with their faces and twice when the masks don't come off. Bored, they play at being machines. Throats full of whistles, theirs is a language of grinding. The oldest boy stands in a bookshop, reading about religion, trying to understand. If we are made in God's image, what part can we possibly be? The ugliest boy in Christendom considers bliss. If I were the first person in the new world, symmetry would not equal beauty. A face split in half should not recast itself. That is a sign of evil, doppelganger. In this new world, I would be Adam, etymologist and poet. 1 + 1 would not equal 2. Nothing would be whole. No parts would fit. All uneven pieces, we would tumble lopsided, never knowing enough to miss the perfect circle, the absent Eve. I have to laugh every time I introduce this poem. My mother's a big fan of my book, of course, and her favorite poem is "The Ugliest Girl in Christendom Goes to the Gynecologist," which, you know, is maybe weird. Anyway, the ugliest girl in Christendom goes to the gynecologist. When she asks the doctor what it looks like, the doctor hands the girl a small mirror. The girl curls her knobby shoulders forward, places the glass between her legs, and gasps in fury. Here at last, all the missing all the missing pigment, all the rich color, the plump curvature she longs for. Outside, her body glows white, Siberian hair, pale eyes, skin white as pneumatic froth, and thin, so very thin. When she swims in front of the pool light, her siblings see her every attenuated bone, the long fingers of ribs closing over her heart. But here, between her legs, smiling lipstick. The doctor raises a questioning brow. The girl scowls more deeply, shimmies forward on the table and swings her legs down, the knock of her knees a dull sound. The doctor leaves and the girl pulls on her bra and shirt, contemplates ways to wear very short skirts, to bend until people see her burst, the real rage of her body, the small strip. She pulls her bikinis up slowly, fuming. What good is a secret that can't be told? The ugliest boy in Christendom meditates. There's an epigraph. All that we are is the result of what we have thought. The mind is everything. What we think, we become. The Buddha. I thought myself ugly, heard it in every gasp, saw it in every step back. I believed with my eyes, and now I think nothing and become it. A river's mouth, different at every moment, and think myself nothing more, or everything, the sum of beauty and ugly, bone and long muscle, action and thought. Everything is better than something. No exclusions, only everything in the river running by, pulsing in the same direction. The 4 ugliest children in Christendom go to Cirque du Soleil. And this is a poem in parts. 1, how clowns love them. So unexpected and so many of them. 4 little Russian dolls of ugly. Big fat boy, pale skinny girl, and a pair of twins, twisted faces and limbs, joy. The children heaved onto shoulders, little devils on a perch, Parisian gargoyles. Above the heads of the poor clowns, the twins wrestle, forgetful of where they stand. They see only each other, the orbit of struggle, the other star in the universe. The crowd sits, stirs, sighs, mouths agape. Ugly little miracles. Oh, clowns. This is a game of chicken you can never win. 2. First, the clowns flip a small woman, ass over tea kettle as she clutches at her dress. When they spin her, the dress stays close, revealing nothing of the suggested. Then they march the fat boy up, lift his arms, prepare him. The oldest boy grins, delighted. Perhaps they will make his body move as he would like. He waits for the strong arm, the spin of floor to ceiling. Instead, they grind hard fingers into his stomach. Tickle, tickle, fat boy. We cannot flip you. The audience roars. 3. The ugliest girl is not picked by the clowns. She eats her popcorn, watches the sad spectacle of her brother returning to his seat. She looks neither amiable nor otherwise absorbed. The circus draws her with the trapeze artists, a ball of connected bodies, unfurled to reveal white dancers, white tights, white faces as if ghosts appeared before the crowd, flying through the sky. She would be cheaper. No tights, no rice powder, just her body, a pair of hands wrapped around her wrists, her whole weight in motion. She could swing, gain momentum, offer her hands like that. And she'd do it without the safety lines. No fear of falling, the floor is suddenly beneath her, breaking her down. What is done is done. Gravity cannot improve upon this design. But the sweet distance of air, only the movement of the body, not the body itself. Instead of her effort, knotted muscles, shrunken limbs, they would see movement, the flight she suggests. So the other thing that I tend to write in clumps, like where I write narrative and then I do something else. So I've been writing with visuals in mind. So I've been doing ekphrastic writing, and this is based on a piece by Oiva Toika, who does glass work. And so it's almost like Brady Bunch squares of glass work, and they're all different and they're kind of set on top of each other. And it too is a poem in parts, because now I'm all about parts. All right, so it's called, the poem and the artwork is by the same name, and it's from the Palmer Museum of Art. The Life of Singles, 1. We rest beside and atop each other, encased in glass, a nasty sort of joke. Small on the part of an artist who works in teams, guides minions across the floor, who calls out commands and sees them met, who spins and melts and solidifies only to contain. Only observation, the fluid eye, the cold matter, curvaceous and lush. I can see they want to touch me, but here we are. Some Hollywood squares, some B-lister cracking jokes far from the warm hordes, their intimate laughter. 2. I look like a crumpled bodice atop a long skirt, sheer with lines, a red carpet dress where you can still see the undergarments. So much window dressing. In the corner, a skirt sprouts horned ears, as if one might shriek into them and be heard. One seems a Jane Eyre cloak, another bears petals ripe and red. Were we the bad ribs? The ones the reaching hand of God could make nothing of? The body split open for nothing. The serpent slithered past, seeking only the paired ones, salt and pepper, hands and gloves, Adam and Eve. No whispers in the glass, bereft of breath, bread in a box. Once we were the act, now the creation. Such stillness here. The arcing bodies rain down, but never pour or spill, never simply sag. We once were fluid, inherited heat, a molten bulb of body, and what we might have been surpassed all we know now to be. Here, we're only the echo of would-be selves. So the other artist who's really been appealing to me recently is a photographer named Nicholas Bruno, who does these very surreal images based on, he has sleep paralysis. And so I've kind of been moving from those images. And I'm going to read a couple of those and then finish with one of the Poems from Life, which is the poems that I do with senior citizens. So this poem is called In the House Under Water. We were born of water, the algae slick across our mouths, wiped away to breathe, and we inhaled that animating breath, bellies like billows, until we found our limit. The taut little mounds now sunken, our hearts a flash of wings. And now we're here, as before, feet underwater, the pale bell of my dress puffed and piled, darkening slowly. You keep your shirt sleeves down, still formal even now. Your head beneath any word that might travel between us. A river barrel from the old house, found purchase and settled. And a hand reaches forth, scissors snicking open and closed. That mouth will find its mark. True through the line, and you'll fall forward, sink into the old rooms until you're flat on your back, lying in bed, and the only sounds are the words you didn't speak, sent up like speech bubbles, gurgling in the weeds. Targets. In the house underwater, targets bloat with fermenting hay. The mold dances like motes in the air, and you gulp it down, this fetid drink. You haul the targets onto your back, Sherpa to the next world, the above world, where you will stand the fool, water pouring around you like judgment, a gift from home. You squelch when you walk, the mud pulling at your soles until the weight becomes burden and you pause to unpack, your hands greased and glossy with slime, the viscera displayed before you. This time, you pull the bag over your head, the circling target, the red smile on your face. You nod when people notch their arrows, draw back their bows. The missed shots surround you like a cage, and you sit, arms locked behind you, praying to be struck. Wish. We threw ourselves in the wishing well, arms around each other, falling together until suddenly we stopped. The well cinched like a ring around us, no end and no beginning, only eternity in the clutch. Our heads stayed clear, bent to the other's shoulder, the air swirling with snow, rippling with heat. The bucket lay beyond us, where we had thrown it in the muck. What had we wished for when we tossed ourselves forward? The children come round now, pennies in hand, and place them on our tongues, close our jaws, and tip our heads back. We accept the payment. What else can we do? We've taken wishes with us. And now the coins spin through the ribs, released from the pelvic bone like teeth plucked from its wide smile. Someday, the waters may rise and we'll shoot forth, a cork burst from the bottle, a sprawl of bones in the mud. When they find us, if they find us, the children will cast us, trying to read some future in our bones. So this poem, as Renee said, one of the things that we do is called Poems from Life, and it links poets with senior citizens, and we get senior citizens of varying abilities and sort of awareness. And the woman with whom I worked had her PhD, and she had an MFA in visual arts. She was a collage artist, and she was in the memory unit. And so for a good portion of the day, she was incredibly with it, which meant that she had absolutely no peer in the memory unit. And so the majority of her time was kind of spent in that really painful space. And so this poem was written for Alice Riddy, and it uses kind of collage technique, because that was Alice. Portrait of the artist as an old woman in the memory unit for Alice Riddy. Here you are again, the smartest girl in the class, the jewel in the paper crown, voices of books still ringing in your head. Omissions are not accidents. You, artist and technician of fragment, foot, mouth, eye, you speak to some whole, but only whisper of totality. I know what this is. Remnant. Fragment as fetish, as focused. Your lost world, this room. These slanting spines, unframed photos, burble of jazz. You might have cut yourself out. The Syrian queen bobbing in her shuddersome circle. I began in a heap of chaos, you say. Now this compressed scene. 8 by 10 feet, inches. Shall I declaim, you ask? Shall I declaim this poem? Another self in your throat, broad collage of theater and listener, language and sigh, your hand raised to the imagined other. You and Ashbury are talking. Paint it into blooms, slice it from the page, paste it onto the foam board, declaim it. Have you read Disorder and Light, Proust? Yes, remembrance of, no. In search of lost time, if you please. Imagine the brain as riverbed and tributary. The red dust of clay and the sudden shot of synapse firing, electric stream running, pulsing again at 50, then 83. Your first color, Danube blue. Then the pure pleasure of intellect, that darting bird. I learned to see things from a distance. Valhalla, the circles of hell, the gold of heaven, those familiar songs, and your curiosity, always there, like knowing. Thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Camille, Yvette, for such a wonderful reading, and you can really feel your tenderness and care for her, and that's just lovely. Karen is going to take over for a moment because I think we have time for some questions and answers. Karen?
Thank you, Renee.
Yes.
I am pleased to conduct this interview because I have a lot of questions, but I don't see any questions from anybody else. But Renee, you'll help me if there are any.
Okay.
I wanted to talk about the process of writing because I think that both Stephanie and Camille Yvette have very different processes and very interesting and unusual processes. So maybe Stephanie, you could speak a little bit to your process and also maybe tell us about your scientific edge.
I don't have a process. I think it's like Camille, I fall in love with certain things. Simone Weil was someone I fell in love with and stayed in love with. So she's appeared in book after book after book. But that's equally true of mathematics and some of the other, science things that I like. So if I really like it, then I tend to keep on liking it. And I've noticed that I've been going through some of my old notebooks, and I know, which I wasn't, anyway, terrible thing to do, but stuff from back in the, the 70s and 80s, if I liked it then, and I still like it just as much now, and in between all kinds of stuff that just totally drop out and are not important until you get to the next thing that really, oh yeah, I still really like that.
Should I answer the same question about process? I kind of agree with Stephanie. Like, I don't have a process. I'm like, oh, that's interesting. And I get kind of caught into it. And then I also set myself tasks. I have a lot of friends who will say things like, oh, well, I got into the ekphrastic poems because I have a friend who said, oh, I'm doing a reading of ekphrastic poems. You do those, right? And I was like, oh, yeah. and I said, what is that? And it was a few months off. So then I started doing ekphrastic poems. I set myself little like tasks or prompts so that I can get pushed into something. And I think I must have written like 20 false starts before I found somebody who I could actually kind of wedge my brain into. I mean, that's part of it too. And I imagine Stephanie finds this, or I find this with nature anyway, like nature and science there's so much unexplained that your imagination has a spot. And I feel that way with certain kinds of art, but other kinds of art I find is too fully realized that I can't wedge my way in.
Well, how did you wedge your way into the subject of the four ugliest children? Because that to me is a total mystery. And, you know, we at WordWorks published you, and I've been dying to ask the question for a long time.
Oh, well, this is going to make me seem like a real mean person, so prepare yourselves. So when I was raised Catholic, and my mother used to drag us to church, and there was this one woman who didn't make the choir, but really felt that she should have. So she would just like screech from like 6 rows back. And she had this, she had some kids, and they were, unfortunate looking, and I was teasing my mom and saying that they were the 4 ugliest children in Christendom, and she was saying, oh, you should write a poem about that, which, I mean, it could be like, you know, I peeled an orange, and my people would say, oh, you should write a poem about that. It's like, come on. But that actually I ended up writing about, and then it kind of blossomed from there. And my husband has a PhD in archaeology, and so like little things just kind of creep in that you end up pulling together. So
I think that's a fascinating way to get your way in. That's a kind of a wedge that would be unexpected.
Yeah, I mean, you never know what the wedge is going to be, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, Stephanie, you wrote about the Challenger, and I mean, did you pick that up from the news, or was there some other source for that poem?
Well, there's a whole lot of things going on in that poem about ecological threats of various kinds, but I was more focused on ancient stories, the Calendar Girl and Hag of Bear. In other words, how ancient mythic stories actually encoded a lot of scientific information, and was the way it arrived, at, which is something that Simone Weil also thought. And I related to that. My grandmother read me those kind of stories when I was young, and it was a voice that came through strongly. I would say another thing is that as Leah mentioned, I've done these digital poems or electronic poems, and what I like, I think of poems as not saying something so much as enacting a structure, that you can feel the structure. And in terms of digital poems, that structure gained a lot of dimensions, so that interaction and motion and other things can be part of it. So it's been very interesting to me to see how poems live in different modes and on different platforms, and what can be said this way as opposed to that way, and what can be said orally as opposed to on the page. There's a huge difference there as well.
Okay. We do have a couple of questions in the chat, so I'll try to keep watch on the time, but here we go. This is a question for Camille Yvette from Maritza Rivera. Does Camille Yvette see a similarity in the process of visual art and poetry? So in a way, you were talking about your ephrasis poetry. So I'm thinking that the question may have an answer already, but is there something else you would say about this?
I'm not a visual artist, so I don't know in some ways how they create their art. So I don't know that I can speak to that very much, because I tend to overlay a lot of their biography, or as I know it, onto their art. And I don't know if that's fair or not. And so I don't know exactly how people create it. I mean, I know the process of how glass art is created, just because I know something about it, but I don't know that they do anything close to what people in writing do. And I think that everybody works so individually that I don't actually know if they overlap or not. So I don't know that I can speak to that. But Stephanie, you work with that overlap, right? Where you're working with an image and with words. Does that change your process?
I'm trying to think of where I work with it. I don't think of starting with an image very much. I think I start with something that's in my ear, more of a sonic beginning, maybe I would say. But I do have I do see some things very clearly. Getting into a poem, what I see doesn't always happen via an image. It might happen some other way.
Yeah.
And as I say, it's been the look of my poems on the page. No two of them really look alike. I mean, they look very, very different. They have very different structures, and yet that in that sense, that image is very important to me. It's kind of a score. It's a score for reading, but it's a score for the use of the blank space of the page as well, which is just as important as the words on the page. And of course, it changes with the font. So you get into a lot of trouble when you're trying to print it. You have a lot of fights with people about the way it should look. And that wears you down. But
Do you find that working online has soothed some of those arguments for you? Are you able to better control that?
no, working online is worse.
Well, all right.
Because
Let me ask this final question, because this is all we're going to have time for, and I'm not sure that this one isn't so big that, you know, we might have a little bit of overrun here. But Kathleen O'Toole wanted to say that she was interested in the poetic ghosts or influence behind your work, and heard echoes of other poets, and would love to hear some of the poets that they feel that have been influencing their voices. And I know that both of you have been influenced by French artists, but are scientists, but not poets. Although I would say that Proust, you know, falls into a category of poetics, even though he's a fiction writer or a memoirist. I don't know exactly what you want to call him, but maybe we'll start with Camille Yvette and see what she has to say about poetic influences.
I think when I started writing, I'm still really attracted to storytellers. And so when I started writing, and this is partly the influence of my teachers, but I really was attracted to Elizabeth Bishop and Philip Levine and Richard Hugo, and Sharon Olds, who is incredibly direct, while also doing amazing things with metaphor. But then people started doing things that were unexpected. Like James Tate was constantly surprising me, and Lynn Manuel, and Cynthia Marie Hoffman surprises me quite a bit. And so those were poets that I've really enjoyed. But then the person who I just absolutely adore is Louise Glick. I love her. The Wild Iris is fantastic. So those are probably my primary influences, but I also look to international poets to surprise me too, because they do things that American poets don't do. It's like if they got on the dance floor and we had a dance off, we wouldn't even be dancing the same moves. Like, it's totally different. So that's some of my answers.
Thank you.
So I was going to say, well, Simone Weil, not a poet. She did write some poems, but that's not what I'm attracted to. I also want to say, going back to the image thing, Joseph Cornell's work is very important to me. And that's an image, but it's a sculptural, whole little environment image. Of poets, I would say Lorene Niedecker, Muriel Rukeyser, Merwin, Seamus Heaney, and talking about poems from other continents, Lorca. I mean, that was, again, I think I fell in love with Lorca when I was 12 or something, I don't know.
Well, thank you very much. I'm turning it back to Renee. Renee, thank you for doing the hosting.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you, Karen. Before we go, I've got some good news. We have our own website now. We have a dedicated Facebook page. Just go to Facebook and put in Cafe Muse. And we have our own YouTube channel, which is WordWorks Cafe Muse, I believe. But we will send all the links out to you in our next invitation letter. We would like to thank Karen Alanier, who's the founder of Cafe Muse, and we'd like to thank the WordWorks and my co-hosts, Leah Johnson, Henry Crawford, Julian Berman, who we just brought on board to help us. And he's a wonderful young poet, still in high school. And once again, we want to thank our wonderful poets tonight, Stephanie Strickland and Camille Yvette Welsch. And of course, we want to thank each and one of you, every one of you individually, for joining us tonight and make it a really great reading. Our next Cafe Muse is October 5th at 7 p.m. on a Monday. Please join us to hear Nils Michaels and Sammy Miranda. So I'm wishing you good night, stay well, and stay safe. Thanks again. Good night.